Of course, I still had a lot of past trauma that I needed to work on, though. I mean, there were many times when my biological parents would only have enough money to buy food for themselves and Craig. Or rather, they only had enough to buy the three of them expensive foods. They could, of course, had spent their money wiser and had purchased food for everyone, myself included, but they felt it was a waste. There were nights when they would eat steak and give me oatmeal, or they would have lobster and give me stale bread and water. I was so malnourished when I was sold to the Thompsons. Hi, my name is James, and I'll never forget the day my parents sold me. Trust me, I know how jarring that must sound, but it happened. I was 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, trying to read one of the few books I owned, while my older brother, Craig, lounged on the couch, flipping channels on the TV. I had always been quiet, preferring the company of my books to people. Craig, on the other hand, was the golden child. He was loud, confident, and good at sports. All the things our parents adored. They never hid their preference for him. I was just there. A spare part they didn't know what to do with.
James, it's a shame, but we only have enough energy and love for one son. Plus, we know that Craig will go on to do great things and you're just a mediocre child. There is nothing special about you.
Yep, Craig has true potential. I mean, look at him. He's smart, he's going to be handsome, and with our guidance, he can really make something of himself and care for us later in life. I have potential as well. Why don't you guys ever have faith in me? Because you're an ugly loser, that's why. Your brother is right, but there is a way that you can help make our dreams come true. Huh? Really? I probably should have questioned what my father was getting at, but I was a kid, and I didn't even consider the possibility that they would sell me of all things. One night, they sat me down and told me I was going to live with another family. They can't have children of their own. You'll be doing them and us a favor. Why can't I stay here?
James, you're not like Craig. You don't fit in with us. This will be better for everyone. And like we said, there would be a way for you to help make our dreams come true. Well, with the money that they are going to give us for you, we will be able to live lives of luxury. Don't you want that for us?
Better for everyone. I could still hear those words echoing in my head years later. The Thompsons, the family I was sold to, were kind, loving, and everything my biological parents weren't. I did resent them at first. After all, they had bought me, and I felt very hurt by that. But slowly, I got to understand them better. They couldn't have kids of their own, and had longed for a child for years. When I arrived, they treated me like a gift. It was jarring at first, the way they hugged me, asked about my day, and genuinely cared about my thoughts and feelings. It took me months to stop flinching every time they showed affection. But slowly, I began to open up, to feel safe. Of course, I still had a lot of past trauma that I needed to work on, though. I mean, there were many times when my biological parents would only have enough money to buy food for themselves and Craig. Or rather, they only had enough to buy the three of them expensive foods. They could, of course, had spent their money wiser and had purchased food for everyone, myself included, but they felt it was a waste. There were nights when they would eat steak and give me oatmeal, or they would have lobster and give me stale bread and water. I was so malnourished when I was sold to the Thompsons. It was quite the adjustment for me. The Thompsons actually cared for me. They fed me very well and stopped at nothing to make sure that my mind was always being stimulated and engaged. They filled bookshelves in my bedroom with whatever books I desired and would often go for bike rides with me or take me swimming down by the lake. It felt odd that they actually wanted to spend quality time with me, whereas my biological parents never wanted to see me. The trauma was deeply ingrained, but as the years went by, I started working through it and started feeling more in tune with my feelings. Among them was the growing sensation of being safe and feeling loved and appreciated. Something my biological parents never showed me, not even a little bit. I started writing to cope with the confusion of it all. At first, it was just scribbling thoughts in a journal, but over time, my love for reading turned into a love for storytelling. The Thompsons encouraged it and cheered me on every time I wrote something new. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a purpose. Years passed, and I grew up in a home filled with warmth. The pain of being abandoned by my birth family never truly went away, but it became a dull ache, overshadowed by the love I found with the Thompsons. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I'd written my first novel, which became an unexpected success. By the time I was 30, I was a well-known author with multiple bestsellers under my belt. Life was good. Then, one day, they came back. After I began being successful, I had suspected that they would one day come crawling back, and I was prepared for it. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I received the email. It had been years since I'd heard anything from my biological parents. After they handed me over to the Thompsons, they cut all contact. So, when I saw my mother's name pop up in my inbox, I felt a sick twist in my gut.
James, we need to talk. It's urgent. Call me.
I didn't want to, but curiosity got the better of me. I called, and she answered on the first ring.
James, thank God. I wasn't sure if you'd call. Your brother, Craig, he's in some trouble, financial trouble. We need your help.
Why should I care? And what kind of trouble? She was silent for a few minutes, but eventually she started talking. Apparently they had blown through the money that the Thompsons had given them rather quickly and had been unable to really save up much money for Craig's future schooling. So instead, he ended up getting involved with selling drugs and laundering money through a convenience store he had purchased with the money he made. He was facing potential criminal charges, as the police had begun investigating his store. It was only a matter of time before they discovered how he truly made his money. Even though it was illegal, my biological parents invested all of their own money into Craig's illegal dealings, and had even started a small business for him to use as a front and another avenue to launder money through. They were on the verge of losing everything too, and potentially being arrested as well. Holy crap, why would you get involved in such things?
Well, the money is good, and after we spent all the money we got for selling you, we were desperate.
And what makes you think I'll help you now? Or that I can help you at all?
We need money, James. Enough to hire a good lawyer that can get us off. They have to be really good, though, and that means that they will be very expensive. You've done well for yourself, haven't you? You can help us.
Ha! You're asking me for money? After what you did to me, you sold me off like I was nothing. And then you went and squandered the money that you got. Are you kidding me?
That's not fair, James. We did what was best for you. Look how you turned out.
How I turned out has nothing to do with you. It's all thanks to my real family being supportive, loving, and kind. Everything that you never were.
We're still your family. We need you.
I'm done listening to his drivel. I'm not giving you a dime. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. The nerve of them. After all these years, they came crawling back, not because they cared about me, but because they needed something from me. Typical. I thought that was the end of it, but a week later, they showed up at my house. I opened the door to see my mother, father, and Craig standing on the front porch, looking desperate and furious. We need to talk. What do you want? Without warning, they pushed past me and stood inside my house. I knew instantly that I wasn't going to like what they were going to say, and so I casually started recording with my phone. Just in case. We gave you a chance to do the right thing. Now you're going to help us, whether you like it or not. Or what?
Or we'll make sure your new family pays the price.
What are you talking about? We know where the Thompsons live. You love them, don't you? If you don't help us, well, accidents happen all the time, don't they? If you don't fork over the money, we'll pay them a visit and make sure that they are hurt, or possibly even dead. All depends on my mood when I see them. I felt sick. They were threatening the only people who had ever truly cared about me. My hands shook with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. You would seriously hurt them. For money? You're leaving us no choice. Fine, I'll hire you a good lawyer. I'll contact you in a couple days when I have found someone good. See, now was that so hard? I had never felt so angry ever before in my whole life. After they left, I called my adoptive parents and told them everything, and for them to meet me at the police station. Once there, I showed the police the recording from my CCTV camera of my biological family, threatening me and my adoptive parents, and I demanded that they protect us. The officers that heard the recording nodded and promised that they would. As luck would have it, the recording I made would allow them to go to a judge and prove that Craig and my biological parents posed a danger to the public and needed to be arrested immediately. They sent a squad car over to their houses and tried to arrest them. My biological parents went easily and didn't fight back much, but Craig didn't go down so easily. His shady business deals had finally caught up with him, and the authorities were closing in. When they tried to arrest him, he ran. I remember watching the news that night, seeing the high-speed chase unfold on live television. Craig was driving recklessly, weaving in and out of traffic, desperate to escape. My heart pounded as I watched, knowing how it would end. Sure enough, after 20 minutes of speeding through the city, his car crashed into a barrier. The news anchor's voice was solemn as she reported his death. I didn't feel anything. No sadness, no relief. Just nothing. Craig had made his choices, and now he was gone. My biological parents went to prison for their crimes. I didn't attend the trial. I didn't need to. They were out of my life, just like they had been for years, and that was how I wanted it to stay. As for me, I returned to my life with the Thompsons, the only family I'd ever truly known. They had supported me through everything, even when the ghosts of my past tried to tear me down. I owed them everything. I'm still writing, and I'm at peace now, knowing that the people who tried to use me and hurt me are in jail. I even heard rumors that Craig's ghost constantly torments my parents while they're imprisoned, and they act like they've gone mad. I didn't become the useless, throwaway child they thought I'd be. I became more than they ever could have imagined. And for that, I have no one to thank but myself and my real family. I plan to write a book about my horrible parents. What do you all think? He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms and saying,
You know, I miss the days when this was a local company. Now it's just a free-for-all. First we hire all these dark-skinned, lazy people, and now we have to do business with people like you. If this was my company, we wouldn't have to deal with people like you.
Mr. Lee stood up, looking Dave square in the eye. I thought he was going to launch himself across the table and attack Dave. He just stood there, looking incredibly intimidating. I don't appreciate being disrespected like this. You're completely out of line.
Oh, lighten up. It's a joke. Sheesh, you people can't take a joke. You're almost as bad as Jerry here. This guy doesn't have a funny bone in his body. Must be why his people are always so offended by things.
It's not funny. And what makes you think speaking to our clients like that is acceptable? Mr. Lee, I'm so sorry for this. But before I could say anything more, Mr. Lee took a step forward and without warning, punched Dave square in the face. I stood there, stunned, as Dave stumbled back and fell.
What the hell is wrong with you?
You should treat people with respect. Maybe now you'll think twice. Hi, my name is Jerry, and I have quite the story. It's about the absolute worst boss that I ever had, and I think once you hear it, that you'll agree with me. The first time I met Dave, I knew something was off. He was standing by the coffee machine, grumbling to himself about how things used to be. He didn't shake my hand when he introduced himself. He just looked me up and down, gave a curt nod, and walked away. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe he was just having a bad day. I had just started at the company, and I didn't want to make waves, so I kept my mouth shut, and I figured that I should give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, I really had no idea if he always behaved that way or if this was just a one-off occurrence. But the red flags were everywhere, and they only got worse over time. Dave was the manager, the guy everyone was supposed to look up to. But he didn't earn respect. He demanded it, and he did so with a sneer. He made everyone uncomfortable, but with me, it was different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but over the months, it became painfully clear that Dave had a problem with me. The way he treated me clearly showed that the reason he had a problem with me was because of the color of my skin. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. He'd walk by my desk, muttering under his breath about hiring standards these days, or he'd make jokes that seemed harmless on the surface but carried a sharp edge. Once, during a team meeting, he looked directly at me and said,
I guess we're diversifying the workplace now, huh? Shame, really. Back in my day, things worked fine without doing so.
I forced a laugh, even though I could feel the heat rising to my face. The other employees, to their credit, seemed uncomfortable too, but no one said anything. I could tell they were afraid of him. Dave had a way of making you feel small, of reminding you that he was in charge. If anyone dared to question him, he'd tear into them with a kind of relish that was disturbing to witness. So, for a long time, I just kept my head down, trying to do my job and avoid his gaze. But that didn't last. One day, Dave called me into his office. He was sitting behind his desk, leaning back in his chair with a smug look on his face.
Jerry, I've been looking at your performance reviews and I have to say, I'm not impressed.
What do you mean? I've been meeting all my targets.
Maybe on paper, but I don't see you putting in the effort. You're not like the others. You don't have the same work ethic. It's a cultural thing, I guess.
With all due respect, Dave, I work just as hard as anyone else here. We all come from the same culture, Dave.
No, you don't. I'm sure you think you do, but you don't. People like you always have excuses, though. At any rate, this company has a certain standard, and frankly, I'm not sure you measure up. Just know that I'll be watching you extra closely from now on.
I left his office that day feeling humiliated and furious. I wanted to confront him, to tell him he had no right to speak to me that way, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. He held all the power, and he knew it. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Every day, Dave found new ways to belittle me. He'd assign me impossible tasks, then berate me when I couldn't complete them on time. He'd make snide comments about my background, sometimes within earshot of my colleagues. And whenever I tried to defend myself, he'd just laugh, as if my frustration was amusing to him. The worst was that he would constantly say things about Africa and how lazy Africans were, implying that I was lazy because I was black, in spite of me telling him constantly that I was born in the same city as he was. His racism was just so frustrating. One day, however, he crossed a line I never thought he'd cross. We were meeting with a new client, a man named Mr. Lee. He was a kind, soft-spoken man, and we'd been working on securing his business for weeks. But as soon as Dave walked into the room, I could tell something was wrong. He looked at Mr. Lee with a sneer, and before I could even introduce them, he made some crude comment about foreigners taking over. Mr. Lee's face turned red, and he shot me a look that I'll never forget. I tried to salvage the situation, apologizing profusely and trying to steer the conversation back to business, but Dave wouldn't let up. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms and saying,
You know, I miss the days when this was a local company. Now it's just a free-for-all. First we hire all these dark-skinned lazy people, and now we have to do business with people like you. If this was my company, we wouldn't have to deal with people like you.
Mr. Lee stood up, looking Dave square in the eye. I thought he was going to launch himself across the table and attack Dave. He just stood there, looking incredibly intimidating. I don't appreciate being disrespected like this. You're completely out of line.
Oh, lighten up. It's a joke. Sheesh, you people can't take a joke. You're almost as bad as Jerry here. This guy doesn't have a funny bone in his body. Must be why his people are always so offended by things.
It's not funny. And what makes you think speaking to our clients like that is acceptable? Mr. Lee, I'm so sorry for this. But before I could say anything more, Mr. Lee took a step forward and without warning, punched Dave square in the face. I stood there, stunned, as Dave stumbled back and fell.
What the hell is wrong with you?
You should treat people with respect. Maybe now you'll think twice. He turned to me, giving me a small nod. Thank you, Jerry. I can see you're a decent man. But I won't be doing business with a company that allows people like him to work here. I watched as Mr. Lee walked out, leaving Dave fuming. He glared at me, his eyes full of hatred.
This is all your fault. Blacks and Asians always playing the victim.
You know what, Dave? I've put up with your abuse for years. I've kept my mouth shut, hoping things would get better, but they never did. Maybe it's time I tell the owner what's really been going on.
Go ahead, Jerry. You think he'll believe you over me? I've been with this company for over a decade. You're just a nobody.
But for the first time in years, I didn't feel scared. I felt strong. I walked out of his office, my head held high, and went straight to Mr. Thompson, the owner of the company. When I walked into Mr. Thompson's office, he looked up from his desk, surprised.
Jerry, what brings you here?
I took a deep breath and told him everything. I spoke about the years of abuse, the racist comments, and the way Dave had treated not just me, but everyone else who wasn't like him. I could see the shock on Mr. Thompson's face as I recounted each incident, how Dave had belittled me and humiliated Mr. Lee. Before I could finish, a colleague who had overheard our conversation came in and showed Mr. Thompson a video she had recorded. In the video, Dave was making remarks about how blacks are lazy and only good for sports, and questioning how I managed to secure such a job.
Sir, I'm sorry I didn't show you this sooner, but I was scared of what Dave would do if he ever found out.
I had no idea. I never thought any of my employees would do such a thing.
Well, now you do, and I can't keep working here if he's allowed to stay.
You're right. This is unacceptable. I should have seen it sooner. I'm so sorry, Jerry. No one should have to go through what you've endured. Dave will be dealt with, I promise you that.
Later that day, I watched as Dave was escorted out of the building, his face a mask of rage. He glared at me as he passed, and before he was too far away, he quickly turned around and ran towards me. It was obvious that he intended to attack me, and so I quickly grabbed an office chair and threw it at his feet as he ran at me, tripping him and making him fall to the ground. Where the security guards that were escorting him out jumped on him, and after punching and kicking him a bunch of times, were finally able to restrain him so that they could get him out of the office. The next morning, Mr. Thompson called me into his office again. I was nervous, wondering if I was about to be fired for causing so much trouble while Dave was escorted out. But when I walked in, he smiled, gesturing for me to sit.
Jerry, I've been thinking about everything you told me. I failed to create a safe environment here, and I want to make it right, and I think I know just the way to do it too.
I nodded, unsure of where he was going with this.
As of today, I'd like to offer you Dave's position. You've shown remarkable resilience and leadership, and I think you're exactly what this company needs right now. We need someone who can rebuild trust and lead with integrity.
I was stunned, unable to speak for a moment, but eventually I accepted. From then on, the office felt completely different. I made sure that people felt comfortable and seen. Dave had been such a terrible boss, and I very much didn't want to lead through fear. Instead, I motivated people and rewarded when they did amazing work. It didn't take long for our department to start to excel and to take on new clients. I was even able to get Mr. Lee to give our company a second chance, and as a result, I brought a huge amount of profit for the company. When Mr. Thompson saw that, he gave me and my team all bonuses for a job well done. As for Dave, though, after being fired, he had a really hard time finding another job and ended up having to settle for working 2 part-time jobs. One job was at a local fast food restaurant flipping burgers, and the other was as a cleaning person. Unfortunately for him, the owner of the cleaning company was a black woman, and when she heard how much Dave hated black people, she started overworking him and became very strict with him. Dave hated his second job, but he had no other choice. Neither paid nearly enough, and sadly, even though he had been close to retirement, he was forced to dip into his retirement savings to cover the costs of his home. I even heard that some white kids, who were outraged by Dave's racism after learning why he was fired, broke into his house. They destroyed most of his belongings and shattered his windows, but they didn't steal anything. Instead, they left a poster in his living room that read, "We are watching." Unfortunately, they were never caught, and Dave had to spend his own money to replace the items that were destroyed. This meant that instead of retiring in 5 years like he had planned, that he would more likely have to work for the rest of his life. Of course, I felt no sympathy for him. After all, he had let his hatred for people that were different than him ruin his career. He could be upset with me all he wanted, but ultimately he had no one else to blame but himself. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
Sick? I don't care. You're coming with me this minute.
Before I knew what was happening, the man lifted me effortlessly and threw me on his right shoulder. Immediately, he left my house, ignoring my cries of pain. We arrived at the company, and I was carried to the marketing department. He dumped me on my seat.
Start working!
I had no idea how to react. I found myself typing. However, with each second that passed, I was getting weaker. A few minutes later, I blacked out. The next time I opened my eyes, I realized I was at the hospital. I received my letter of dismiss there, and I couldn't be happier. I chose being jobless over getting killed by having a job. Two years ago, I got a job at a famous chocolate-making company. Before then, I'd used 2 whole years searching for jobs around after finishing college. It was a trying period, and I was desperate to do any job I got. When I got the job at the company as one of the marketers, I was overjoyed. I screamed and jumped in happiness, as it was my dream to be a marketer.
That company? Bro, can you cope there?
When I announced the news to my friends, they had quite a lot to say about the manager. Apparently, 2 out of my 3 friends knew people who'd worked there and had to leave because of the man.
My cousin had to attend therapy sessions for 6 months to get over what he did to her. He's a cruel asshole. No one can report him because he's also very manipulative. Even more, the owner trusts him completely, and everyone he's bullied knows it's a waste of time to try reporting him. The whole thing sounded weird and unbelievable. I mean, there's no way 3 people would report him, and all 3 would be termed liars. Also, couldn't they think of a way to get evidence to prove that the man was evil as they claimed? I concluded that their stories were stupid. I was going to take the job and see for myself if the man was as ruthless as they claimed. I resumed the next day. The first person I encountered was a man with a very good build. He was tall and very muscular. He also had a few strands of gray in his hair. I could see everyone who passed him, bowing their heads to greet him. I immediately concluded that he was the CEO of the company. I was about to approach him when I was stopped by his sudden yell. "How dare you drop my bag? You're fired! Fuck out of here this minute!" I was shocked. The worker behind him, who I hadn't noticed earlier, had accidentally dropped his bag. I was confused on how he could fire her for that. Another worker, without being told, quickly approached them and took the bag from the lady. Afterward, she turned and walked out in tears. I stood in shock and watched as the man made his way in. Once he got to the elevator, everyone moved away, giving him space. When the elevator opened, those inside quickly rushed out, giving him the chance to use it alone. A thought crossed my mind about him being the manager my friends told me about, but I shook it off. There was no way a manager could have that much authority. Once he'd left in the elevator, the workers heaved a collective sigh. It was obvious that they were scared of him, from their body movements and facial expressions. I approached one of them. "Hi, bro. I just got employed yesterday and it's my first day at work." "Who was that man from earlier?" "That's Mr. William. He's the manager here. In anything you do, avoid him. Even the slightest mistake will make him fire you. He just fired our best marketer for accidentally dropping his bag." Hearing that made me both shocked and scared. My friend's stories were slowly starting to seem true. The man was indeed cruel. However, I hadn't even started working yet. I couldn't give up so soon. As I stepped into the elevator with some colleagues, I resolved within myself to avoid the man as much as I could. Even if I did come across him, I would make sure to do everything I could to not make any mistakes. I walked into the marketing department, and the head of the team approached me. I was assigned to my desk and given the rulebook. I was also given some things to type out. However, the man instructed me to go through the rulebook first, before doing anything. Going through it, my mouth hung open. The rules were outrageous. First, we had no sick leave. How could sick leaves be canceled? I left my seat and went to the leader. "I'm sorry, but it says here that there's no sick leave. How's that possible?" "Well, the manager canceled that for marketers. We have to ensure our chocolate is leading in the markets. We ensure to not fall sick. However, when we do, we treat ourselves here at work." The whole thing didn't seem normal to me. What if it's a serious case and you have to go to a hospital? Well, we make sure it doesn't get to that point by going for a full-body checkup monthly. Please, return to your seat and finish reading. We have a lot to do. After work that day, though it was too stressful. I returned home very tired and unable to even take my night bath. I fell asleep immediately my body touched my bed. The next morning, I was forced to wake up by 6 a.m., have a quick bath, and put on any outfit my hands chose. I had to be at work by 7:30 a.m. I left home around 7 a.m. and quickly got a cab that dropped me at work 5 minutes before the set time. That day was the beginning of my life in hell. I thought I'd be able to excuse myself and get breakfast, but I wasn't allowed. The permission to eat was only from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. I hadn't had dinner the previous night. The thought of not having breakfast, too, broke my heart. I managed to work until it was lunchtime. I felt my energy return after lunch, but it all went away by the time I was done for the day. My body was stiff, and the most stressed out it had ever been. However, when I got home, I didn't make the mistake to sleep off immediately, no matter how sleepy I was. I got my clothes for the next day out and had dinner before I finally slept. The next day, I woke even earlier, had a quick bath, got dressed, fixed breakfast for myself before leaving. My life continued that way, each day coming with even more stress. I could barely see my friends anymore. The only day of the week which I was free, I used it to sleep to my satisfaction. I was getting drained, and I knew it. I always had to down pills for headaches and body pains. I would leave,
but I was scared of going back to being jobless. Those 2 years I spent being jobless were horrible. However, having a job wasn't even any better. The only advantage I had was the high payment I received bi-weekly. I knew they paid so much to keep the workers tied to them. For 2 months, I managed to avoid the manager. However, in my 3rd month of working, life happened and I was forced to finally face him. We'd been working on a new way to push our product even higher, and we finally found a way. We needed to have a meeting with the manager for finalization. I dreaded the day until it finally came.
And who are you, lanky boy? Are you new here?
Before going to work at the company, I was quite fleshy. However, the stress and everything that came from the job had caused me to lose weight so much that I had become lanky with bulgy eyes. Yes, sir. I began working here 3 months ago.
Oh, come up here and open the meeting then.
I'd expected that. The leader had informed me prior that he'd want to test my capacity by doing that. However, I was advised again, making my opening perfect. I had to make a mistake to give him something to correct me about. If it were perfect, I'd be targeted by him and tortured verbally until I had to leave the company. He hated to see people better than him. I followed the advice and didn't go overboard. Of course, he had a correction. He yelled while correcting me, but I didn't mind. The meeting was filled with so much yelling and insults, but he finally accepted our idea. I later got to know that he was simply yelling to make us feel our idea was good, but not up to his taste, and he was only agreeing to it because he pitied us. It was crazy. Fast forward to my 6th month, I was getting even worse. I developed insomnia, bad posture, etc. I even began losing my hair rapidly as a result of how stressed I was. Regardless of what I saw the job doing to my health, I didn't quit. One day, my body gave up on trying to hold it in, and I fainted in my room. Fortunately, I woke up a few minutes later. I knew it would be a suicide attempt to go to work that day. I would call the company, but I realized I hadn't had the time to exchange contact with anyone in my department. I decided to receive treatment that day and resume work the next day. Weekly, I reached for my phone and called my personal doctor. He promised to be at my house in an hour. I managed to leave my bed and get a cup of tea while watching TV and waiting for my doctor's arrival. However, 30 minutes later, I suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Though my doctor had arrived earlier, so I forced myself up and went to get the door. However, I was shocked to see the manager standing in front of me. I moved back in fear, and he followed me.
How dare you skip work, huh?
Sir, I'm sick.
Sick? I don't care. You're coming with me this minute.
Before I knew what was happening, the man lifted me effortlessly and threw me on his right shoulder. Immediately, he left my house, ignoring my cries of pain. We arrived at the company, and I was carried to the marketing department. He dumped me on my seat.
Start working!
I had no idea how to react. I found myself typing. However, with each second that passed, I was getting weaker. A few minutes later, I blacked out. The next time I opened my eyes, I realized I was at the hospital. I received my letter of dismiss there, and I couldn't be happier. I chose being jobless over getting killed by having a job. It didn't end there. Once I was discharged, I filed a case of emotional abuse, assault, and physical abuse on workers. I managed to get the previous workers to come in as witnesses, and they agreed, as they were also tired of his wickedness. And I also found nearly all of the previous workers he'd assaulted, and the case was taken to court. The CEO was shocked to see the video of him carrying me out of my house against my wish, which was caught by my CCTV cameras. He was even more shocked by the testimonies of all the workers, which were nearly 100. The court sentenced him to 10 years imprisonment with hard labor. All of his money and investment were also shared between all affected workers, leaving his family who depended on him with nothing. His wife was furious after finding out how horribly her husband had been treating workers and filed for divorce. The CEO also gave me my job back. Due to how well I'd performed at work, more than the old workers, I was promoted to the post of the marketing leader. I didn't think the punishment was enough for the manager, so I went to visit him in prison and told him of my new position. I could see how angry he looked, but I just laughed before I left. I paid some of the wardens to torture him for a week straight. The next week, when I visited again, I was happy to see the marks and injuries all over his body. I'm sure by the time he is out of there, he will be more humble. The company became a safe and enjoyable place to work at. We later heard my boss was nicknamed the Wicked Boss by other inmates and was bullied in prison, and occasionally his food will be seized by other inmates. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel.
Bobby and Suzanne began to slap Tyler and Marvin around. They called them nasty names and would often leave them home alone. Hi there, my name is Seth, and I am having a hard time deciding whether or not I did something bad. Maybe after you hear my story, you can let me know what you think. So let me start off by saying that my parents were amazing. They were patient and very attentive, but they didn't buy me everything that I ever wanted. It wasn't like they denied me anything. If I wanted a toy, they always gave me goals for me to achieve, in order to earn it. I was fairly young, so it wasn't like I could do a lot, really. But if I wanted a new video game, my father would want me to help him rake leaves in the yard or to cut the grass twice a week for 2 months. And so long as I did my chores without complaining, they would buy whatever it was that I was working towards. I honestly never thought that things would ever change, but while traveling for work on their private plane, my parents were caught in a terrible storm that caused their plane to crash, and both of them died that day. I was only 8 at the time, and I really didn't know how to process the pain that I was feeling. I did have extended family, but none of them could be found, and so I was placed up for adoption. Thankfully, I didn't have to wait long as a family came to my rescue and adopted me only a week later. They were a young couple named Bobby and Suzanne, and they had newborn twins named Tyler and Marvin, but loved the idea of having an older child as well. I don't know if the agency did a thorough background check on them, and I highly suspect that they didn't, but they seemed decent enough, and the agency needed to make room at the orphanage, which was overcrowded. Bobby and Suzanne, though, would prove to be among the worst people I had ever met. As soon as they brought me home, they showed me to my room, which was only big enough for a single bed and an end table that they told me was for my clothes. Seeing that made me very worried. It wasn't like I had expected them to live in a mansion like I used to, but I at least expected a room that was slightly bigger than a closet. I said as much to Bobby, and he slapped me hard across the face. "What's the matter? Do you think that you're too good for us? This is your new room, and if you don't like it, then I suggest you begin to pretend like you do, or there is plenty more where that came from." Bobby raised his fist as if he was going to slap me again, and I flinched and fell to the floor. Suzanne, meanwhile, was just laughing at me.
The poor little boy, such a scaredy cat.
"You'll stay in this room unless we tell you that you can leave it. Do you understand?" I nodded, out of fear. They wouldn't let me out of that room to do anything other than chores, school, and to eat. Although the meals that they provided for me were barely edible. They would often feed me bread, water, and if I was lucky, applesauce. Meanwhile, the twins were beginning to grow up, and while I had to follow millions of rules, they were allowed to roam free and do whatever they wanted to. Bobby and Suzanne would often say that as their adopted child that I was no better than just a servant that they allowed to have their last name. They didn't care about me at all and would always tell me that I was worthless and that I wouldn't amount to anything in life. As I got older, they even began forcing me to babysit the twins when they would go out, and they went out very often. Both Tyler and Marvin began to see me as the third parent and would often actually prefer me to their actual parents. Even though I wasn't old enough to watch them, I did my best to keep them safe, and the three of us really began to bond as brothers. My relationship with them was the one ray of sunshine in my otherwise bleak life. Between school and all the chores that my adopted parents forced on me, playing with my brothers was the one source of joy I had, but that all changed when I turned 15. I remember sitting in my room all by myself, crying since it was my birthday, and no one cared. At least I thought so until my brothers slid a drawing under my door. It was a picture that they drew of the three of us playing, and it had the words, "Happy Birthday, Big Brother," poorly written on it. It made me feel so happy, but then I heard Bobby and Suzanne talking in the kitchen, and what they were saying worried me. "We need to kick him out now. The money that we are getting from the government is barely covering the cost of feeding him. Plus, sooner or later, he'll get bigger than us, and then we won't be able to bully him to do things anymore."
We'll just figure something out, but he has to go." As soon as they finished arguing, they stormed down the hall to my room and dragged me out of the house and threw me into their car. They then drove me to the other side of the city and told me to get out. But where am I? What am I supposed to do here? "We don't know, and we don't care. Just get out." Before I could say anything else, they drove off. I couldn't believe it. They had abandoned me and left me with nothing more than the clothes on my back. I'm sure it was by sheer accident, but they had abandoned me in front of a homeless shelter, and without knowing where else to go, I wandered into the building. The man that was running the shelter noticed me as soon as I walked in and rushed over to me to find out what was wrong. He could tell by the look on my face that I was in distress. "Hi there, little guy. Are you lost?" More like thrown away. Then told him what had just happened to me and how my adopted parents had been treating me for years, and he just nodded his head as he listened. As rough as my story was, it was one that he had heard many times before, and sadly wasn't surprised. "Well, that is a tragedy for sure. I wish I could do more for you, but the best I can offer is a room upstairs in my apartment. I live above the shelter, and you're welcome to be my roommate, but only on the condition that you stay in school." I didn't know what else to say. The idea that all I had to do was go to school, and he would let me stay with him, felt like a very fair trade, and so I took him up on his offer. He was truly appreciative of how I would do chores around the house and the shelter without being asked, and praised me for doing so even. This confused me though, as I was just doing them more so, as just an instinctual thing. I had been forced to do chores all my life, and so it just felt natural to keep doing them. But unlike Bobby and Suzanne, John gave me credit and thanked me often for all my help. As I grew older, John helped me to save up so that I could eventually go to college. But the day that he brought home a computer for me to use to study was the turning point for me. I found that I was an expert when it came to using that computer, and I loved to surf the internet. In fact, that was when I discovered that there were people that made content for the internet as their careers, and I wanted to be one of them. I started making videos of me playing games, and while it took a bit for people to notice me and start following my videos, I nevertheless started to build up a massive following of people, and that was when I started making money through advertisers. So much, in fact, that I was able to pay for my entire college tuition without having to borrow a single penny. I still volunteered in the shelter, though, as it made me happy to help those that were less fortunate than myself. Even after I graduated from college and got myself my own apartment, I still made sure to spend a large portion of my free time at the shelter, making sure that the people that came there were always well-fed and treated with respect. A few years later, when I was 25, I was working at the shelter when I suddenly saw two young men that looked vaguely familiar. As they came up to me to ask for food, I instantly threw my arms around them and hugged them deeply. They were confused at first, but once I said their names, they embraced me as well. "Tyler? Marvin? Is that you?" After a lot of tears and a hearty meal, they began to tell me that after Bobby and Suzanne had kicked me out, things began to go downhill for them as well. Without me there to take out their frustrations on, Bobby and Suzanne began to slap Tyler and Marvin around. They called them nasty names and would often leave them home alone. When the twins were 15, they decided that they needed to leave just like I did, and so they struck out into the world. The problem was that they had nearly no money and they instantly became homeless. They had been begging for money ever since. As soon as I heard this, I hated my adopted parents even more. It was bad enough that they kicked me out, but for them to treat their own flesh and blood that way was beyond disgusting. I knew that I had to reclaim my role as their big brother, and I invited them to move in with me. Just like John had done for me, my only rule was that they had to go to school and to volunteer at the shelter. They readily agreed, but were worried that they would be too much of a burden on me. However, I assured them that the money that I made from being an influencer was only part of my income. The much bigger portion came from all the investments that I was making. You see, I went to college to refine my knowledge of the stock market and currencies, and that's where a lot of my money came from. After a few months, a reporter came to the shelter and asked if they could take some photos for a piece that they were working on, and I agreed. They took photos of me, Tyler, and Marvin, and wrote a story about how wealthy I was, and how wonderful it was that I had volunteered at the shelter for so many years. I didn't think anything of it, but then a few weeks later, Bobby and Suzanne showed up at the shelter and demanded to speak with me. "Hey you, well, looks like you made something out of yourself after all. That's just as well. Now you can pay us back for all the money that we wasted on you when you were younger.
Yeah, you should take care of us now.
What are you two idiots going on about? You two barely did anything for me other than behave like abusive and dangerous people. I'm amazed that the three of us are even alive today in spite of all that you did. You ungrateful brat. You owe us for taking you in when your stupid parents died. Ungrateful for what? You treated me like a slave and locked me in a small room and took advantage of me and forced me to do manual labor when I should have been a child enjoying life. Oh, that's it. I've had enough lip out of you. I'll show what talking back gets you. I saw him wind up and get ready to slap me, and even though I could have stepped back and dodged him, I wanted him to hit me. I wanted to show him that he didn't have power over me anymore, and so I stayed put and took the slap on my face and just kept staring at him. At least that was the idea. But once he slapped me, it triggered something in me, and I went into a rage, and I jumped onto Bobby, and I began to punch him until he lost consciousness. Suzanne couldn't do anything other than look on in horror as I punched Bobby over and over again. Eventually, police showed up, and Bobby demanded that I got to prison, but after hearing from the people in the shelter about what had happened, the police took my side. They decided that I had acted in self-defense and that they wouldn't press charges against me. I, however, did press charges against Bobby, and as it turned out, this wasn't his first run-in with the law. The officers that arrested him told me that Bobby had quite the rap sheet and was known to get drunk and start fights. When the case was brought before a judge, he took one look at Bobby, and between his many offenses and the fact that he had assaulted a volunteer at a homeless shelter, he sentenced him to prison for 5 years. This made me and the twins feel very victorious. While Bobby was gone, Suzanne really struggled for a bit, but ended up shoplifting to try to make ends meet and ended up getting herself arrested as well. With both of them in prison, they lost their house, and things are going to be very difficult once they are released. As for the twins, they recovered nicely from their time living on the streets, and they are currently in college. One is in school to become a lawyer, while the other is going to become a dentist. And I couldn't be more proud of them. They now see me as their one and only parent, as they have disowned Bobby and Suzanne, and have sworn to never speak to them ever again. As for me, I have more money than I will ever know what to do with, and I have begun donating large amounts to the shelter and other shelters around the city. So there you have it. So do you think I overreacted when I attacked Bobby, or do you think I was justified?
The nurses looked extremely concerned.
Doctor, we really need to admit him. I don't think that he is faking it. I really think that he needs our help.
Him? Forget it. He's probably just a gang member. Black guys like him usually are. Hi there. My name is Joel, and I love to travel. My journeys have taken me all over the world, and I have many amazing stories to tell. But right now, I want to tell you about the one time that I got so angry that I kind of did something really illegal. But hear me out. I promise that I was justified. For starters, I'm 32 years old, and I grew up and live in South Africa. But I speak English perfectly. When I was young, I would look at the globe that my father kept in his office, and I would dream about visiting all of the countries of the world. It was something that I wanted to do more than anything else. And when I got older and became a surgeon, I finally had enough money that I could go on a trip to a new destination several times a year. I've been to every continent except Antarctica, but eventually, I plan to go even there. This story, however, occurred when visited the United States. It wasn't the first time that I went there, but it was the first time that I had major problems. You see, I went to Houston for the first time, and I was having a wonderful time when suddenly I began to feel ill. My abdomen was in agony. The pain was so bad that I nearly was passing out. Instantly, I suspected that it might be appendicitis, and so I rushed to the hospital. However, that was when things began to go downhill fast.
What is this man doing here?
He's complaining about abdominal pain, doctor.
Look at him. He's just trying to get some painkillers. His kind always does.
No, sir. That isn't true. It's probably appendicitis. Please run some tests.
Appendicitis? And how would someone like you know that?
Please believe me. I'm a surgeon.
A surgeon? You've got to be kidding me. See, I knew that he was lying. There's no way that he's a surgeon. There's nothing that his kind won't be lie about.
I was in such pain that I couldn't argue with him. Instead, I sat in the waiting room and assumed that if things got worse, that they would have helped me. Which, at the rate at which the pain was increasing, I assumed that it wouldn't be very long.
As I sat there, I could hear the nurses begging the doctor to help me, but he kept glaring at me and refused to admit me. There were a few times when I passed out from the pain, and when I woke up, the nurses looked extremely concerned.
Doctor, we really need to admit him. I don't think that he is faking it. I really think that he needs our help.
Him? Forget it. He's probably just a gang member. Black guys like him usually are.
I didn't know how much more I could take. The pain was almost too much to bear. I was suffering so much that I was drenched in sweat and couldn't even stand up anymore, or even see straight. It was clear that I had a very high fever, and it was only getting worse. Finally, the doctor came back out to the waiting room, and for a brief moment, I thought that he had finally changed his mind. But boy, was I mistaken.
Why are you still here? Everyone can see that you're just faking it. You're doing a good job, so I can assume that maybe you're an actor of some sort, but I'm not falling for it.
Please, sir. I'm not faking it. I'm in incredible agony. My appendix is going to burst any second.
Just stop already. Why do you people constantly come in here looking for painkillers? You should be ashamed of yourself.
Just then, another doctor came in. The second that she came in, she noticed the other doctor speaking to me and came over to see what was going on.
Hey, what's going on over here?
It's just some gangbanger looking for a drug fix.
She took one look at me and got extremely angry.
Are you kidding me? He's burning up. Nurse, admit this man immediately and run some tests and put a rush on getting those results.
Thankfully, the nurses listened to her and rushed me into the examination room. They ran several tests and also prepared the operating room for me, as the doctor suspected just as I did. Sure enough, when the tests came back, they showed that I had been correct, and I was prepped and rushed up to the operating room. When I finally woke up, I was still in pain, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it was before my surgery. The female doctor that had been my savior walked into my room to check on me.
Hello there, Joel. How are you feeling?
Much better now. How bad was it?
If we hadn't admitted you when we did, then you probably would have died in that waiting room.
I was worried that that would happen. Thank you for admitting me when you did. What was wrong with that other doctor, though?
Yeah, sorry about him. I've tried to get him fired so many times. He's incredibly racist, and I can only imagine the kinds of things that go on when I'm not here. In fact, I was planning to take the day off, but my plans were canceled at the last minute, and so I came into work.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, but I'm really happy that your plans were canceled. Truly, I owe you my life. She laughed and then continued to do her rounds. That whole day, I was very groggy and trying to recover from my surgery. Every now and then, I would see the male doctor that had nearly cost me my life. He would just walk by and glare at me menacingly. Towards the end of the day, he came into my room to threaten me.
Listen, yeah, maybe I was wrong, but if you know what's good for you, you'll just take your pain meds and leave as soon as you can.
Oh, are you just scared that I might get you reported for incompetence?
No one will believe even if you did. They'll know better than to trust a black guy.
What is wrong with you? I would never treat a patient the way you have treated me. This is absolutely unconscionable.
I don't care what you think. You just better be gone first thing in the morning. Or else I'll make sure that you don't walk out the hospital at all.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that he was speaking to me that way. I could only imagine how many people that he had hurt over the years because he was turning people away from the hospital. I didn't know what I could do, but then I looked out into the hallway and saw a bucket of water and some cleaning supplies sitting on the ground near to an emergency exit. A dark thought instantly formed in my mind. I knew that the doctor would be walking by my room at least once more, as the elevator was near to my room, and so even though it was really hard for me to do so, I managed to sneak out of my room. I quickly checked the hallway to make sure that the coast was clear, and then I propped the door to the stairwell open, and then dumped all the water and cleaning supplies on the ground, and then returned to my room to wait. I didn't have to wait long when I heard the doctor coming down the hallway. Once he was outside my door, I rushed him with all the energy I could muster and shoved him onto the tiled floor, where I had dumped the chemicals and water. It didn't take much to get him to slip and be sent flying across the hallway and through the open door and into the stairwell. My intentions were for him to fall down one flight, but since he was covered in the fluids, he kept falling down the stairs until he fell all the way from the 6th floor that we had been on to the ground floor. Carefully, I crept back to my room and tried to go to sleep to make it look like I hadn't done anything at all. In the morning, I checked myself out of the hospital and quickly made my way to the airport and flew home. I was terrified that I would get in trouble for what I had done, but no one had stopped me leaving the country. When I got home, I looked up online to see if anyone had reported about what had happened, and I was shocked to see that the local news had reported a terrible tragedy at the hospital that I had been admitted to. They reported that a doctor had a terrible accident and had slipped on spill and had severely injured himself, falling down several flights of stairs. The injuries were so severe that he was forced to retire, as he would never be able to perform surgery again and had lost the ability to walk. Part of me felt guilty for just how badly he had been injured, but a much larger part of me felt that I had gotten justice for all the people that he had no doubt hurt over the many years of his career, and all the people that he might have hurt had I done nothing. So tell me, was I in the wrong?